Greetings, QVS U.S. History students. I hope you're having a good weekend. I hope last week was productive. We had no work last week, but I know that some of you used the time effectively to either get caught up with Unit 1 and 2 or even do the A-level essays for those two units. And in all cases, I'd like to commend you on the efforts that you have been making in the course. I've been pleased with reading your A-level essays, and if you are saying to yourself right now, well, I haven't written one yet, then just be assured that it's not too late, and there will be time for you to get caught up. However, today I do want to talk about moving into the next unit, which is Essential Unit 3. I will take you to the course page and talk about your responsibilities for this week and talk more about like where that unit will take us in terms of the next project that I hope that you all will work on, the A-level for Essential Units 3 and 4. It is a project for both of those units, and if I don't talk about it today, I will talk about it in next week's video, or perhaps I'll even make a separate video on that project alone. It's going to be a group project, so I hope that you guys are willing to work together. It should be fun. And I will, like I said, talk more about it next week. So let me take you to the course page and let me talk about Essential Unit 3 and what your responsibilities are as we move into this unit. Notice the pacing for the unit. The unit will be open for 3 weeks. You could see the dates there below. And in terms of those 3 weeks, we'll have 2 weeks of intensive work, and then you'll have a week to kind of like study and prepare for the unit test. The name of this unit is An Era of Growth and Disunion. So the period that we will be focusing on is from 1825 to 1877. And as you can see from the map that I chose to represent this time period, a lot happened. In the last unit that we looked at, the United States did double in size with the acquisition of this territory called the Louisiana Purchase. But in the period from 1825 to 1877, the country grows even more. It's at one point in the country's history that the United States engages in war against Mexico. And through that war, the United States gains a large amount of territory, namely the Mexican cession. I'm not going to disinclude Texas, but Texas technically broke away from Mexico on its own volition and then was eventually annexed by the United States. It was that annexation of Texas that led to the Mexican-American War, and with the defeat of Mexico in between 1846 and 1848, and under the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, the United States gained all of this territory that includes like California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, New Mexico, a large amount of land over here. So yet again, the country grew during this time period. They also, well, in the last time period, they gained Florida in 1819 through a treaty with Spain called the Adams-Onis Treaty. And then the United States even gained this territory referred to as Oregon country up here. It had been disputed for a long period of time between the British and Russia even, and eventually the United States made treaties with those countries and gained this land. So a lot happened. Also within the context of this time period, the country divided, and I'm talking about all of these land acquisitions, but then through all of these land acquisitions, there was really a big conflict over the expansion of slavery. So as the United States gained more territory, the question was whether or not to let the institution of slavery expand into that territory. Eventually, because there was so much disagreement over the expansion of slavery, as the North grew very anti-slavery with the abolitionist movement, and the South continued to advocate for the expansion of slavery because of the great economic profit that many plantation holders were gaining. It ended up leading to a conflict in the history of the United States referred to as the U.S. Civil War between 1861 and 1865, the bloodiest conflict in all of U.S. history. So you'll learn about that conflict also as it relates to expansion, but that's going to be later on in the unit. In fact, I'll talk more about it next week as we consider the implications of expansion. But your focus for this week is to learn how the United States gained all of this territory that you see on this map right here. So let me scroll down. But here are all the resources. So there's textbook sections that you can read and refer to through the context of these activities, and even some of those textbook files are referenced in these activities below. So your focus is going to be here with week 1. You can see, as I said before, we'll be leading up into a 3-week unit, with the last week being a work week. But in week 1, there are 5 different activities for you to do of varying lengths. You might find that some take more time than others, but I think you've found that with many of the activities already. In the first activity, you're going to consider Western expansion. There's a famous book, it's called Dangerous Nation, written by a man named Kagan. And I want you to listen to an NPR podcast about that book. I think you'll hear from the author himself, and answer the question in the forum, the extent to which the United States is a dangerous nation. So that should be an interesting debate for us to have. And I don't want you to hold back your ideas. The last thing I ever want you to do is to feel like you can't say what you want to say as it relates to some of the different forum topics. So my question is, was the U.S., is it a dangerous nation? So you could talk about the role that the country played in the world in the past, in the 19th century, and even the role that the country plays in the world today. Be honest, be diplomatic, of course, in your posts, but be honest and feel free to share your ideas. I enjoy reading them, and will respond as well. So it's about a 30-minute podcast. Listen to it and then respond to it. If you want to read it, you can read the transcript of the podcast right there. Because, and I asked this question because it does relate to Western expansion, but I also asked the question because back in 1820, an important piece of foreign policy was issued called the Monroe Doctrine. You remember looking at James Monroe, who was one of the presidents of the United States, namely during the era of good feeling. And John Quincy Adams, who was the Secretary of State for James Monroe, had issued this piece of foreign policy. And essentially what it did was send a warning to Europe to keep their hands off of the affairs of the Western Hemisphere. In the 1820s, there were a number of revolutions that were going on in the Western Hemisphere. Many of those revolutions were influenced by the American Revolution back in the 1700s. We just got done studying that revolution. But of course, it influenced like the Haitian Revolution, the Mexican Revolution, and also the Latin American revolutions in South America, where these states had gained their independence from Spain. So when the Monroe Doctrine was issued to Europeans to keep their hands off of Western Hemispheric affairs, that was a bold statement that was made. And it really kind of like put the United States like on the world stage in terms of its foreign policy, especially as it relates to kind of like policing the world. So I want you to kind of think about that as you listen to this podcast and then as you present your thoughts in the forum. That's the first activity for the week. And then let me take you to the course page. Then this one's a quick one. You'll listen to a crash course episode. You'll look at this map again. Listen to a crash course episode and answer some questions as they relate to Western expansion. In this activity, you'll hear about the Mexican-American War and the results thereof. And then this is a really good activity, this next one, or at least I enjoy it. In 1839, there was a writer, his name was O'Sullivan, and he had coined the term manifest destiny. And one of the most famous paintings that illustrates this idea of manifest destiny was painted in 1872 by a man named John Gast. You're going to do an analysis of this piece of art, and you can even watch a couple videos about it. My apologies for the doubling up of this one, but watch this video and this one because it will kind of like have you look at that piece of art much deeper. And then at the bottom here, there's an art analysis worksheet for you to do. I think you could really learn a lot about American expansion through this painting alone if you look closely and study it very closely. So I'll be interested in hearing your thoughts on that notion of manifest destiny, especially as it relates to the idea of progress. And then carrying on in this next activity, you'll be looking at American expansion or Western expansion a little bit more closely. You could watch a little video here about manifest destiny. And then when you open up this worksheet, literally what you are going to do in this activity is you'll consult the textbook. And in your consultation of the textbook, you're going to have to outline each piece of land that was added to the United States over time. And you have to make a judgment for me as to whether or not you believe that that land acquisition was justified. And if you kind of look at how the United States gained territories, they were either through like purchases or treaties or war. And as you consider how each piece of territory was added, I would like kind of your impression in terms of whether or not you believe that that land acquisition was just. And then the final activity this week has to do with reforming America. One of the most important parts of the U.S. Constitution is the preamble. And in the preamble of the U.S. Constitution, the very first phrase is "We the people." And then it goes on to say, in order to form a more perfect union. The idea was that the founding fathers knew immediately that over time the country would improve. And in the 19th century, much of the improvement came through some major reform movements. There were a lot of problems in the early country's history, namely slavery. And in this activity, you're going to look at the number of reform movements that existed in the early 19th century. You could start with this crash course. And then there is a worksheet attached here that outlines for you all of the different reform movements and yet another rating activity, because after you consider all of the reform movements like abolitionism, women's rights, let's see, education reform, asylum reform, temperance, which was the movement against alcohol consumption. After you kind of consider all of these different reform movements, I want to know from you which one you believe was the most important piece of reform that needed to take place in the United States in the 19th century. Okay, so those are the different activities for this week. Again, there are 5 of them. They will take varying amounts of time, so make sure that if you get one of them done in 15 minutes on one day, don't think that you're just done with the class for the day. Take the time to move on to another activity so that you can pace yourself properly for the week. And then I'll talk to you again next week, and we'll look at the U.S. Civil War. But in the meantime, please don't be afraid to contact me. I'm happy to meet with any of you. We can Skype or Zoom if you feel that it is necessary. But until then, make sure that you make that first forum on whether or not the United States is a dangerous nation a good one. Make relevant posts and respond to your classmates' posts, and I will do the same. Bye.